This is America's Voice Live on a Tuesday. Thank you for making us part of your day. We do appreciate it. Joining me now is Dr. John Lott. He is the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center. You can always find more at crimeresearch.org. A couple of big topics to cover today. Doctor, welcome back to the program.
Great to talk to you again.
You've been doing some digging into this whole idea that somehow voter ID is somehow prohibitive to voting in America. This is something we hear all the time from the left. Somehow having a voter ID law makes it a racist law, makes it impossible for people of color to vote. But it just doesn't make any sense, especially when you realize that America really is an outlier here, right?
Oh, yeah. America has about the laxest rules in terms of determining who can vote and restrictions on preventing fraud. Look at Europe, for example. There are 47 countries in Europe. 46 of the countries require voter IDs, photo voter IDs issued by the government to go and vote. The only holdout is United Kingdom, and they already have it in Northern Ireland, but they have legislation right now that's going to bring them in line with the rest of the continent. So you're pretty soon going to have all 47 countries in Europe having not only photo voter IDs, but most of them ban even things like absentee ballots because of problems that they've had in the past with fraud.
It seems unusual because we talked about this previously. You gave a really good example to me recently where you said you even tried to game this a little bit. You went in to get a COVID shot, said, oh, don't have an ID. They won't allow you to get a COVID-19 shot. And it is quite clear that communities of color have been highlighted as having higher rates of the disease, higher rates of death and bad outcomes. And wouldn't it be racist then to get an ID for a COVID-19 shot, but that you have to do, but getting an ID for voting, they still scream racism, white supremacy, and all this other stuff. What do you make of that?
Right. I mean, you think if lives are at stake, which is what exists with regard to COVID, you would think you'd want to go out of your way to make sure you don't have, quote, racist types of rules that were there that were discriminating against certain groups. But as you say, state after state requires that you've had to show a photo government-issued ID in order to go and get the vaccine. I tried to do it, try to pretend I didn't have an ID here in Montana, and they wouldn't let me go and get it. They would have prevented me from getting it. So, this racist angle, you look around the world, it's not just Europe. Pretty much developed countries all around the world require photo IDs for people to go and vote and have other protections against fraud. They've learned the hard way, time after time, about vote fraud existing, and it's parties on both sides. It's in socialist countries and non-socialist countries, in the United Kingdom. Because of all the vote fraud that they had in Northern Ireland,
Sure.
Both the Labour government and the Conservative government, when they've been in power, both have adopted rules to try to provide IDs and have other restrictions.
Yeah, here's what's strange. To hear the Democrats tell us about voter ID and vote fraud. Let's focus on fraud. To hear the Democrats talk about vote fraud, it's just a conspiracy theory.
Right.
It doesn't really exist. It never really happens. That's just the right-wing weirdos and fringe people talking nonsense. And yet we can go to Texas in 1948 when Lyndon Baines Johnson cheated on an election. You can go to the whole state of Louisiana, the city of Chicago, the city of Philadelphia. I mean, but the left tries to tell people, and too many people believe this, oh, it's just a conspiracy theory. Strange, but it's what they do.
Right. Well, I mean, when we put together this report for the Crime Prevention Research Center, we looked at the stories and the reasons why different countries had adopted these rules. Not all of them had bans on absentee ballots. Not all of them had photo ID requirements that were there. They adopted them after they saw evidence of fraud. So you take Northern Ireland, for example. In 1985, the conservative government adopted ID requirements, but what later was found out under the Labour government was that people were able to counterfeit some of the IDs that were being used. And so the Labour government said, look, we got to adopt tamper-proof photo IDs that are issued by the government for people to go and vote. You look at our neighbors, Mexico and Canada. They both require IDs. Mexico had a long history of vote fraud that was occurring. In 1991, they banned absentee ballots, and they also required that you had to have a biometric photo ID that has your fingerprint, your photo, and has other protections that are there too. So, if somehow this discriminates against Hispanics, I mean, it's kind of hard to explain why South American countries, Central American countries, Mexico, Spain, all have these types of ID requirements.
They must all be racist, Doctor. They must all be racist nations, clearly.
Well,
You've made the case there.
Mexico clearly hates
Let's
Hispanics.
move on to one other topic. I want to move on to one other topic. I've got a little bit of time here because in Texas, they just passed House Bill 1927. House Bill 1927 is on its way to Governor Abbott's desk. It is a constitutional carry bill that will become the law of the land in Texas. It passed by a wide margin in the House, 82-62, and by 17-13 in the Texas Senate. It would allow people in Texas to carry a concealed handgun, no permit at all, as long as they meet the requirements that they're 21 years of age, they have no criminal record that would prevent them from carrying a handgun, and so forth. It's a big deal, isn't it?
It's a huge deal. Texas is the 21st state. I think this will begin to get some national news coverage that the media has been trying to ignore this trend. My guess is Louisiana is going to end up being the 22nd state. But there are two huge changes that this creates. One is it makes it possible for somebody who needs to be able to go and protect themselves quickly to be able to do so. I mean, if you have a woman who's being stalked or threatened, it's taken at least 60 days in Texas, at least 90 days in Louisiana to go through the process to go and get a concealed handgun permit. If a woman's being stalked or threatened, making her have to wait 60 or 90 days may be too long. The other issue is the cost. You look at a state like Louisiana, the total cost for going and getting a concealed handgun permit is about $300. It's well over $100 in Texas. Well, the people that my research finds who benefit the most from being able to go and protect themselves are the people who are most likely victims of violent crime. That overwhelmingly tends to be poor blacks who live in high crime urban areas. Making somebody have to pay $300 or even $100 to be able to go and have the option to be able to go and protect themselves may stop them, the law-abiding good citizen, from being able to go and protect themselves. And so those are the two big changes that are coming about as a result of this. But I think this is important for lots of reasons. One is almost half the states now have constitutional carry. You can literally walk from West Virginia all the way up to Idaho or down to the Mexican border, from the Gulf of Mexico up to Canada, now without having to have a concealed handgun permit. And I think it will have some impact on the Supreme Court's case that they decide to take up this October with regard to New York.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you about. What impact on the justices of the Supreme Court? There's a very big case coming before the justices. We won't see it, obviously, until June of 2022, the outcome. But real quickly, tell the viewers what the case is and how this might impact the decision-making process.
Right. Well, you have 43 states that are either right to carry or constitutional carry states where there are certain objective rules that once you meet those requirements, you're allowed to be able to go and protect yourself. There's 7 states, including New York and California being the biggest, which are so-called may issue permits, where you have to not only go through those objective criteria, but then you also have to go and convince somebody, a public official, that you have a good reason to be able to go and protect yourself. In those may issue states, only a couple tenths of 1% of the population legally has a concealed carry permit to protect themselves. In the other states, it's about 10% of the adult population that does that. And so, it's very likely, I think, that the court is going to say you have to get rid of this good reason provision that are there. But then you still have the question about what is a reasonable set of rules. So, for example, in Illinois, when they were forced by courts to adopt a right to carry law, they made it so it costs about $450 to go through the process to go and get a concealed carry permit. Only about 3%.
Which is prohibitive.
Exactly.
Right. And so I see how the constitutional carry, there is no cost. You can defend yourself on short notice if need be. If you're the victim of a stalker or any other concern you might have, you can defend yourself in short order. Doctor, we have to leave it there, but good conversation,
Thank
important
you.
stories. Dr. John Lott is with the Crime Prevention Research Center. You can find out more at crimeprevention.org. Excuse me, crimeresearch.org. Crimeresearch.org. I always appreciate his input. It's very good.